Welcome to the Blockbusters and Birdwalks podcast. I am the curator, Garrett Chaffin-Quiray. The novel, The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, was published in 1983. Ron Hansen wrote about the closing days of the Frank and Jesse James gang, which had been formed based on their experiences being bushwhackers in the Kansas-Missouri border wars, Bleeding Kansas, which was a little but savage area of the Civil War's contest. They come out of this war experience with no marketable skills but doing murder and mayhem, and so apply themselves to becoming robbers. Around them they collect a core group of other outlaw figures, whether they were cousins or old friends, and an ever-evolving and changing group of hangers-on. One of these young hangers-on was a man named Robert Ford, Bob, nearly half a generation younger, and eventually Bob Ford pulled a weapon on Jesse James and shot Jesse James dead, hoping then to cash in on this newfound fame, and then being killed by shotgun. The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford was turned into a Brad Pitt vehicle in 2007 by Australian filmmaker Andrew Dominic. It was budgeted at around $30 million and lost a lot of money when it was generally released. Folks didn't turn out for this, domestically or internationally. It may be because its mythology as a Western runs against type. We don't have an optimistic story of accomplishment, of building a civilization. Instead, we have a lengthy character study of two men, Jesse James, that's Brad Pitt, and Robert Ford, played by Casey Affleck, and around them are collected a whole group of secondary performers. This is headlined by Sam Shepard in a brief turn as Frank James, the elder brother of Jesse, Jeremy Renner playing a cousin of the James brothers, Wood Height, Sam Rockwell as Bob Ford's older brother Charlie, Paul Schneider playing a Confederate of theirs called Dick Little, and several other performers. There's a star turn in the supporting cast. James Carville plays the real character of Governor Thomas Theodore Crittenden, who delivers a stunning speech about what he wishes Bob Ford will do with respect to the Jesse James problem.
Jesse James sent me a telegram last month saying he'd kill me if he had to wreck a train to do it. He said once I got in his hands, he'd cut my heart out and eat it in strips like it was bacon. I'll wreck his train first. Jesse James is nothing more than a public outlaw who made his reputation by stealing whatever he wanted, killing whoever got in his way. You'll hear some fools say he's getting back at Republicans and Union men for the wrongs his family suffered during the war. But his victims have scarcely been selected with reference to their political views. I'm saying his sins will soon find him out. I'm saying his cup of iniquity is full. I'm saying Jesse James is a desperate case and may require a desperate remedy.
In both the Hansen novel and in this Hansen movie, we realize that a good amount of screen time and page time is spent watching and reading Bob Ford admire his prey. We read and watch Bob Ford gaze upon the older man, looking at his worldly possessions, admiring his wife and children and home. Importantly, this is always contrasted with scenes in the movie and in the book where Jesse does sudden turns to violence. This leads to an important gift exchange where Jesse apologizes.
How long have you been studying me?
You're gonna break a lot of hearts.
How do you mean?
It's a present.
It's heavy.
Well, you gonna look inside?
It's April Fool's Day, you know.
It ain't no joke.
Oh, such extravagance.
Don't that nickel just shine, though?
It's more than I could hope for.
Well, I figure that granddaddy Colt of yours may blow into fragments next time you try to squeeze the trigger.
Well, you might have something there.
I'm going a long way around the barn to say that I've been feeling cornered and just plain ornery as of late, and I'd be pleased if you'd accept that gun as my way of apologizing.
In the Western tradition, because the gun symbolizes so very much, killing potential, wealth, we realize that Jesse is giving Bob the means of his ultimate masculine power, the ability to kill properly and with a good solid weapon. There is a tendency among cultural critics to minimize material inside of genre entertainment that doesn't conform with the standard idea of what that genre entertainment is trying to achieve. So, the Old Western is attempting to figure out how it is that pioneering souls move in some direction and civilize the landscape, transforming nature through penetrative human activity into constructive lands, bringing with that society's expansion the church, schools, roads, commerce, capitalism. We do well to remember that there are vestiges of other reads we can apply to the Western, which I believe are equally valid. I'm overcome with thoughts that we can't help but look at this movie as not only the story of men penetrating nature and controlling it, as the story of men going to war, returning from it as veterans who are permanently scarred, and we also need to consider that this story is the story of men. While there are Westerns that turn in other directions, this particular Western is entirely devoted to the man-love expression between Jesse James and Bob Ford. This expression of love can be brotherly. It can also be turned into a closeted expression of a romantic or erotic love and affection one man has for another, which had no likable expressive potential in either the source novel, the historic moment, or in the movie that comes from same. The consequence of all of this pent-up emotional expression comes out in violence, and ultimately of the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. In the end, I left the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford thinking that it was not that good of a movie. With time, I continue to kick this movie around my head, which tells me that though this movie is complicated and is long, I now believe it's quite a good movie because it takes apart one of the fundamental myths we have of the Old West, that an outlaw is in fact sometimes the moral arbiter of what is right and wrong. Instead, we realize very quickly after meeting him that Jesse James is a sociopathic bad guy. And so is Bob Ford, who kills him. And probably the civilization that built up after they were gone is really their main contribution. The James gang regularly robbed trains. And they robbed the trains not only of the coinmaster's purse, but also of the wallets and handbags of people they would meet in the passenger carts. The mythology of the James brothers is very much a Robin Hood tale, but that's not true. They were stealing from everybody. Bob Ford did not live through the bushwhacking experience. He lived under the influence of an idol. This cultural myth set the groundwork for the kinds of gangsters we would see rise up during the Depression, for the kinds of attitudes that modern people in the 21st century think about nostalgically as being the grit, determination, strength, and bravery of the Old South. This notion of the outlaw and of the South and the great cause transformed from being what I believe was fundamentally a concern over agrarian privileges and slave ownership to produce massive farms and enrich Southern landholders, that gets turned into a myth of the independent person who strikes out on their own because they're entrepreneurial. They have backbone, they have nerve, they have integrity. No one really cross-checks that and says that it's infused with racism, it's infused with regionalism, it's infused with cruelty and violence and all of the attributes that made Jesse James famous. By the time Robert Ford kills him, the mythology of a bad man is greater than the qualities of a good man and is actually more useful, more adjustable, and more valued by people long after the fact of his death than anything else in his actual lived experience could possibly be. They got out of the way so things could be improved. So we spend the last portion of the movie watching Robert Ford grow older. He's a business operator. He crosses the paths of the wrong man who, in the end of the movie, shotguns him to death. And that's how the movie ends. Nobody escapes unscathed. And that remains a kind of revision of what the Old West actually is. It's a place that we do well to remember more honestly than our cultural visions in movies and television have allowed us. There are wonderful technical merits in the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. It starts at the top with the cinematographer Roger Deakins, who drapes the movie in really, really wonderful imagery. A lot of this imagery harkens backward to a long tradition of the Western format. But there are other virtues in this piece, and that has to do, I think, with the editing of Dylan Titchener and Curtis Clayton. The movie's vignetted.
He went everywhere with Jesse. They made trips to the Topeka Exchange Saloon, where Jesse could spend nearly 60 minutes sipping one glass of beer and still complain about feeling tipsy. Bob would rarely vouchsafe his opinions as they talked. If spoken to, he would fidget and grin. If Jesse palavered with another person, Bob secretaried their dialogue, getting each inflection, reading every gesture and tick, as if he wanted to compose a biography of the outlaw, or as if he were preparing an impersonation.
Jesse appears completely aware of Bob's odd fascination.
Can't figure it out. Do you want to be like me? Or you want to be me?
By its end, after Bob Ford's ascendance to the New York stage and fall into disrepute and destruction, beyond questions even about how the Civil War remains a national wound, the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford is the study of how men age, and age badly in a time of savagery. A few words from the source novel may suffice to summarize the feeling. His skin was white as sheep's wool, and the scars on his chest were red as slaughter. He was muscular in the back and shoulders, and sinews crossed his pectorals like laces, and his biceps bunched when he lifted his wrist to tenderly examine it. But his ankle was knurled where he'd broken it. Varices mapped his calves and thighs. His buttocks were flat as books. There were wrinkles of skin at his kidneys and neck. His ribs could be easily numbered. His shoulder clicked. When he circled it, he bent with apparent pain. The many injuries of a reckless career had made him prematurely decrepit, as ancient as the Noah that Ham spied on in the tent. Thank you for listening to the Blockbusters and Birdwalks podcast. My name is Garrett Chaffin-Quiray. Boop boobity doo.